Welcome to section 3.4 as we talk a bit about the cycles and how human activities actually alter those cycles. And so we're going to go through all of them that this book requires, and we're going to talk about matter. Matter definition is the form of nutrients, anything that has mass and takes up space, but we're looking at how does matter move through an ecosystem. And again, we're going to look at those different types of cycles. So let's look at the first one. Actually, the five that we're going to talk about is the hydrologic or water cycle, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Keep in mind that any one of those nutrients can remain in a reservoir for a really long period of time before they're actually released. So let's look at the water cycle. The water cycle has three main jobs: to collect water, to purify water, and distribute water across the earth. And it does that using three major processes: evaporation, precipitation, and transpiration. Evaporation is water heating up and again going from a liquid to a gas. Precipitation, going from that gas to a liquid. Transpiration is actually evaporation from plants directly. Now, I'm sure I don't have to go through the water cycle. It's something that we've been covering for quite a number of years, but you have to keep in mind that the water cycle's job is a natural renewal of water quality. So we need to have that water cycle in order to have pure water. So some of the things that humans do to alter the hydrologic cycle is they can withdraw large amounts of fresh water at rates faster than nature can replace it. So we're even talking aquifers, withdrawing it from the aquifers for irrigation, streams and rivers to fuel, not to fuel, but to give water to populations or cities. We can clear water or clear vegetation. When you clear vegetation from an area, you increase the amount of runoff. And you can also reduce infiltration, especially if you start to cover it with concrete or blacktop, as we can see in this diagram. So we can see a natural ground cover, and again, only 10% runoff, and then we have almost 50% soaking into the ground. But when you start to clear that vegetation and put blacktop and concrete, we now have 15% getting into the ground and 55% of runoff. Also, we drain and fill wetlands for farming and development. And wetlands are important for reducing flood control. They're like sponges that absorb that extra water from runoff. So this is just a basic diagram that's in your textbook that shows you the water cycle. The red is the human impacts, and the red arrows show you the pathway affected by those human activities. So again, increasing runoff of land covered with crops, buildings, or pavement. So increases the amount of runoff. We also increase the amount of runoff from cutting forests and filling wetlands, also allowing more pollution to get into those wet areas. All right, overpumping aquifers reduces the water table itself. Water is pretty important for life, and these are just some water properties. You can find these also in your textbook. We've also covered them in biology and other classes. So the property of water is it's liquid over a large range of temperature. It changes temperature slowly due to high heat capacity, has a high boiling point, has properties of adhesion and cohesion, which allow plants to actually move water up from roots to their leaves against gravity. It expands as it freezes so that it keeps ice floating on lakes so that we don't freeze the whole lake. It's a universal solvent, so it does a lot of dissolving and part of a lot of our chemical reactions. And it also filters out harmful UV light. Let's talk the carbon cycle. All right, the carbon cycle is actually based on carbon dioxide. It is actually a natural thermostat. If you don't have enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's cold. If you have too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it gets too hot. And the whole process is that producers remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Consumers use that carbon dioxide by eating the producers. And then also keep in mind, some carbon takes a really long time to recycle. For example, decomposers can release carbon dioxide into the air, and it can stay there for hundreds of years. Carbon dioxide can also be dissolved in oceans, and it's stored in the bottom sediments of oceans. And that's actually the largest store of carbon. The ocean sediments have been compressed and put under pressure, which actually make fossil fuels. And that could not be released for millions of years. However, it is a non-renewable resource, fossil fuels are, because it took millions of years to form, and we're actually burning it at a rate far faster than we can replenish it. So some of the things that humans are doing to alter the carbon cycle is we're burning fossil fuels, which actually releases carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. We clear forests, which actually do the job of absorbing carbon. Plus, they also contain carbon. So by clearing them, we're also releasing that store of carbon itself. So we alter the rate and flow of carbon. We have a high carbon footprint, and carbon enhances greenhouse gases. So here is another diagram that's also found in your textbook. Again, red shows the pathway affected by humans. So we burn fossil fuels and transportation. We reduce or clear forests through deforestation, and that also increases carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So all of that increases the total amounts that we have. The nitrogen cycle is another major cycle, mostly used by bacteria. The major reservoir of nitrogen is actually in our atmosphere, in which we have 78% is nitrogen gas. We need nitrogen for proteins, vitamins, and nucleic acids, and unfortunately, we cannot directly absorb it from the atmosphere. So the first step is that we actually have to fix the nitrogen into a form we can use. And it can be done one of two ways. The first way is through lightning or any type of electrical discharge. The second type is through bacteria and cyanobacteria. And their job is to take that nitrogen in the air and mix it with hydrogen to make ammonia and ammonia ions. So it will actually take that nitrogen, and they're called nitrogen fixing bacteria. They take that nitrogen in the air along with hydrogen to make NH3 and NH4 plus. The next step is called nitrification. So that bacteria can actually change ammonia and ammonium ions into NO3 negatives. So here we have that NH4. It goes through a process in which it makes nitrites and eventually makes nitrates. The nitrate actually has a negative charge and makes it very easy for the plants to take up. So when the plants take up the nitrate ion, the plant incorporates it and it's being used to make amino acids, proteins, DNA, and vitamins. The waste product, or anything that did not get used, we have to turn back into nitrogen gas. So there's another type of bacteria that are called denitrifying bacteria that take that NO3 and turn it back into nitrogen gas, creating that cycle all over again. So we really have to have that bacteria to make that nitrogen cycle work. So what have humans done to alter the nitrogen cycle? Well, the first thing is that we remove nitrogen from the atmosphere faster than it can be replaced so that we can actually make fertilizers. Then we turn around and add large amounts of fertilizers to our land, and that can run off into our local water supplies, causing excessive growth of algae and causing alterations in that type of area. We can also burn different types of fuels, which add more nitrogen oxides into our atmosphere. And those nitrogen oxides actually turn into acid rain. So that is a harmful for where it falls. Plus, a different type of nitrogen oxide actually increases our greenhouse gas that actually causes a breakdown in the ozone layer. So there's a lot of things that we do as humans to alter the nitrogen cycle. Today, currently, there's 2 times more release of nitrogen from the land, and we expect another doubling more by 2050. Here's another diagram that shows, again, this is also in your textbook. The red arrows are the pathway affected by humans. So again, nitrogen oxides from burning fuel and inorganic fertilizers add nitrogen into the atmosphere. We do take some of that away for commercial nitrogen fertilizer. We put it on our fields. It goes into runoff, causes an overabundance of algae, and again, that can actually kill the oxygen level. We can lose some of that nitrogen to deep ocean sediments. We can cause excess ammonia in the soil. So there's a lot of things that could actually happen to cause problems in our ecosystems. The phosphorus cycle is a cycle that does not use the atmosphere. It only cycles through the water, the Earth's crust, and living organisms. We need phosphorus for DNA, RNA, ATP, and ADP, which is our energy sources. We also need it for vertebrate bones and teeth. The major reservoirs for phosphorus are rock formations and ocean bottom sediments, which are actually been trapped there for millions of years. We actually get phosphorus out through slow weathering processes. And actually, there isn't a lot of phosphorus in the soil. So, some of the impact of human activities include clearing forests, and that actually removes topsoil that actually has phosphorus in it. So, removing that phosphorus makes us as humans want us to put more phosphorus down on the earth in the form of fertilizer. So we remove large amounts of phosphate from the earth to make fertilizers, and that fertilizer is then placed on the ground. Erosion leaches those phosphates into streams, again, causing an overabundance of algae growth because they're plants and they like that fertilizer, but the algae suffocate and die and eventually cause more problems in that particular area, or it will get trapped into the oceans. So here's another diagram, again, red, that pathway affected by humans, and again, causing a lot of issues, phosphates in the mining waste, phosphates in sewage, phosphates in fertilizer, all running into our local streams. And finally, the sulfur cycle. Most sulfur is found in rocks and deep under ocean sediments. It's mostly stored in rocks and minerals. The sulfate ion is found in deep ocean sediments, and it actually enters our atmosphere naturally, usually released by volcanoes, can be released by sea spray, dust storms, and actually forest fires. And there are some bacteria and algae that actually use sulfur in their processes to release it for it to be used in our bodies. Sulfur is used in proteins, and so we actually need them for protein synthesis. Some human activities, we actually burn sulfur-containing coal and oil. We refine sulfur-containing coal or oil to make gasoline. And we actually mine for minerals, and those minerals actually contain sulfur that gets released when we're actually mining for other types of minerals like copper. So again, another diagram that you find in your textbook that shows you the pathways affected by humans, mining and extraction, burning coal, smelting, and refining that. Again, that's also going to go into our atmosphere. The sulfur mixes with the oxygen and actually creates an acid rain. And again, that can be deposited elsewhere, causing a lot of damage to that local ecosystem.